When I was training to be a minister, I trained at a college in Birmingham, Queen's College, an ecumenical college, and in the middle summer of my training there, we were sent out on a placement to go and practice being ministers, and I went to Droitwich, which was a town sort of south of Birmingham, and spent a month there with the minister and with the congregation. And the minister thought it would be a good idea for me if I went out and did some visiting, which was fine. I was okay with that. I didn't have a car, so I went out on foot. And it was the first time that I'd worn a clerical shirt. And I felt really conspicuous. I thought, people will be looking at me thinking, is he on his way to a fancy dress party or something? Because I just felt so, it didn't feel right somehow. Still feels a bit odd today, but anyway, that's the way it goes. And I was walking down a road, a fairly busy road in Droitwich, and across the road there was an accident. It wasn't a really bad accident, but a bus drove into the back of a car. And I thought, right, I'm a minister, I'm on the other side of the road, there's a story in the Bible somewhere about ministers walking on the other side of the road, so I'd better go and do something. I'd better respond to this situation. So I went across to the other side of the road, I went to the door of the bus, and I said to the bus driver, is there anything I can do? I'm actually a nurse, which I was previously. I obviously thought a nurse was more help than a minister would be in that situation. All was well, it was fine, nobody was hurt, it was okay. But I've always remembered that situation of working out how we respond. Suddenly I was a public face of the church and wondered how I responded to something. And I want this morning for us to think about how we respond to the situations that are placed before us in lots of ways and lots of times in our lives. And so we've heard two different Bible readings about how to respond. The first was from Jeremiah. It was written to a group of people who found themselves in a strange land. They'd been deported, they'd been exiled. They'd had to leave the place they were, where they were familiar, and go and live in a new place. And so God sends them some guidance. And God says to them, get on with it. Raise your children, get married, have a family, contribute to the welfare of the place that you're living in. Make the best of where you are. Make it a good place to live. He was giving them a choice about how they would respond, either to moan and groan about this new place that was different to the old place, or to make the best of the place they found themselves in and seek to make it a good place where God could be there and present. And then the second reading, our New Testament reading, is a healing account, and it comes from the Gospels. Jesus encounters a group of lepers, and we're told there are 10 lepers. And no doubt they were desperate to be healed from the suffering and the pain of leprosy, but also from that sense of social exclusion that came with that particular illness. Jesus sends them on their way, and they're all healed on their journey. And we're told only one of them makes a response to go back and to thank Jesus, to say, I'm grateful for what you've done. My life is transformed. Two different accounts. Two different responses. I just want us to think and reflect on those responses and think about three ways, three situations and responses that are made today. First of all, and I apologise, I'm going to mention the B word, I'm going to say something about Brexit. In a way, Brexit has brought us into a new land and a new reality. And like the people that Jeremiah's writing to, perhaps we find ourselves feeling a bit uncomfortable and a bit uncertain about how things are and the way that things are going. We're not sure what the future holds, and that uncertainty is unsettling. The whole Brexit debate has certainly brought much disagreement, much division. In lots of ways, it seems to have polarised opinions and people, dividing rather than uniting. And for each of us, our response to what's going on may well be different. But they may include things like fear, frustration, anger, resentment. I doubt that many of us, when we switch on the news and realise it's all about Brexit, which it often seems to be, feels joy in our hearts. But that's where we find ourselves. That's where we are at this time in our nation. And like the exiles in Babylon, we have a choice about how we respond to it. carry on complaining, or to do our best for the welfare of all people? To reflect the negative way in which this issue seems to be debated in the national arena, or to show a different way, which is God's way? Last week, a letter was sent to all Methodist ministers, and it came from the President and Vice President of the Methodist Conference, Barbara Glasson and Clive Marsh. And it was encouraging us to respond to Brexit. And it was encouraging us to put our energy into focusing on reconciliation and peace building. And it suggested various things that we might do. Remembering the situation in our prayers, supporting food banks for those who are in need, showing welcome to EU citizens, and also being concerned for our children and young people for whom these are confusing times, as they are for us. And one of the challenges in that letter was to write to our local MP and assure our MP that we are praying for him, as it happens in this case. I thought that was something we could do as a response to what's going on. And so I've taken a letter from the Joint Public Issues team website, and I've got some copies of it. And if you wish to, you can sign the copy of the letter from St Andrew's Church to Julian Smith, our MP, saying, we are praying for you because we know these are difficult and challenging times. We've all got a choice about how we respond to Brexit and what's going on. Let's respond in ways that promote peace and well-being and promote God's values in our country. And then the second thing I want us to think about is how we respond to God when we have an encounter with God, or when something happens in our relationship with God. For those 10 lepers, each of those 10 lives was transformed by God, but only one responded that we know about and came back to speak to Jesus. Only one acknowledged what God had done. As a church, over the last months, you've been reflecting on what's next. What's next for God's plans for this place? I've been reflecting on different areas of church life, and some really good things have come out of those conversations. And as part of what's next, we're planning that in the new year, we're going to focus on what our story is of God's story, or where God's story is at work in our lives. We want to encourage us to have the confidence just to tell a little bit of that story publicly. And that's not an area that many of us find easy, speaking about what God is doing or where God is at work. But maybe there's a challenge here to stand up and be counted, to be willing to share something of our story and God's story. I want you to imagine for a moment that you go into Morrisons. And in Morrisons, there's a really good special offer on your favourite box of chocolates, or even a really good bottle of wine, if you drink wine, which some of you may do, I don't know. Would you just keep it to yourself, stock up your own cupboard and think, right, I'll look after number one here? Or might you tell other people about it? Might you say to a friend or a neighbour or someone in your family, get down to Morrisons, there's a great offer there. We would tell other people because it's good news. We don't hold back at sharing an offer in the supermarkets, but we're very reticent sometimes to share the good news of what God is doing in our hearts and our lives and our church. I'll say a bit more of this a bit later, and we're going to watch a little video that encourages us. But just a challenge to respond to what God is doing in our lives. How do we tell God's story and our story? And then thirdly, I just want to share very briefly about a response that's been made at St Andrew's Church in our community over the last couple of weeks. Many of you will have read in the paper about the food bank. And the food bank has been made homeless, and there was great concern about what would happen. The good news is the food bank has a home, and the even better news is that it's moving to St Andrews, and it's moving into the rooms where Citizens Advice Bureau used to be. That's good news. Now, it may come as a surprise to some of you, although I suspect, although it was supposed to be a secret until today, that lots of you already know about it. but it's really exciting. That's taken some careful negotiation. It's taken a lot of work for some members of our church and the Baptist Church. But they will be moving in the next few days into that space. Jesus saw a group of lepers who were in need, and he responded to them. He saw the need that was there and he did something about it. I'm really glad that as a church, we've been able to respond to a need in our community. We're providing a home to the food bank. And in doing that, we're making sure that the really valuable and vital work of the food bank can continue to flourish in this place, because they support so many in our community who are in need. It's really good to be part of a church that can make that response. And it's just one more response, as I've heard about other responses this church has made to the needs around us. Things like Street Angels, Christian Aid, the welcome of refugees, the Wellbeing Cafe, and so on. Responses to a need that is being seen. My heart's gladdened by the responses that have come from this place to the needs that we see, and we go out in love and share God's grace with others. So just 3 things that we might respond to. Brexit, telling our story, the food bank. There's lots of ways we can respond to what God is doing in our world around us, in our community, at work, in our families. We can choose to stand on the other side of the street and look on. Or we can choose to get stuck in with what God is doing now. Let's have the courage to respond, to do what God's calling us to do, and to live for his values in this world. Amen.